And I'll introduce myself. I'm Sarah Weber. I'm the Florida Friendly Landscaping Specialist here in Charlotte County. And Jody is also with us. Jody, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sorry, it helps if I unmute myself. I am with Charlotte County Florida Sea Grant, as well as the IFAS UF Extension Office.
So yes, thank you for joining us. We'd love to know where you're tuning in from. So if you don't mind putting maybe what county or town you're in the chat box, that would be great. So your videos and your microphones are going to be off for the presentation, but please feel free to ask questions in either the chat box or the question and answer box. And after the 30-minute presentation, we're going to go through and answer all those questions. Just to let you know, the webinar is recorded. It will be uploaded to our YouTube channel likely tomorrow. And if you missed any of our other Florida 101 classes, they are all on there as well. And then there is a poll at the end, just a brief little poll to just gauge what you learned and see if you liked the class. We'd appreciate it. It helps us a lot if you can take the poll. And with that, did I miss anything, Jody? Oh, sorry. I don't think I missed anything.
It sounds good. Sorry.
Okay, very good. So with that, I'm going to introduce our wonderful guest speaker today. We're excited to have him. It is David Outerbridge. He is the director for UF IFAS Extension in Lee County in Sustainable Food Systems and Natural Resources. His programs educate on food production, business development, community resource development, natural resources, and localized food systems. David's current research is a qualitative examination of food systems in the context of COVID-19 interaction and response. So we are really grateful he's here today, and I know I'm excited to learn about edible plants, wild Florida edible plants. So with that, I'll hand it over to David. Thanks so much.
Good morning, guys. How's everybody doing? I see a few master gardeners from Lee County. Welcome, Marianne, Josette. Thanks for joining me here today. I've given this talk a couple times. It's kind of an evolving talk that I give as part of my kind of food systems and natural resources work. Just to give you a brief background of who I am, my background in education is I have a master's degree in anthropology, and I focused on ethnobotany. And I have a postgraduate work in geography. So I'm really interested in how we as human beings interact with plants and how plants utilize us, and vice versa. I studied a lot of the South Pacific and kind of Oceania cultures and how they utilize plants. So this kind of fits into that. I'm really into ethnobotany, but I'm also into edible landscapes and kind of maximizing the amount of production nutritionally you can get out of a small area. So this kind of ties into that. It's a presentation I came up with the help of Stephen Brown, our horde agent, to look at the wild edibles that we have in Florida. Some of these are introduced, but the majority of them are native species. And there's going to be different components of them that are edible, not the entire plant for everyone. So let me just make sure my clicker is working. All right. So what is an edible wild plant? There's different components of edible wild plants. Some plants you can eat the leaves, some you can eat the roots, and others are the fruits or the flowers or other things like that. Some plants you can eat all different parts of the plants. There's other plants that need special preparation in order to become edible. They can be toxic or poisonous in certain compositions, but they are not poisonous if prepared properly. A good example of that is yucca or cassava. That is quite poisonous if eaten raw, but if you prepare it right, it's one of the starch staples of the world. The starch staples looking at like rices, wheats, taros, other things like that in different cultures. So the learning goals today are to help identify edible wild plants that we have in Florida, and the habitats that edible wild plants are found in. And I'm just going to move my. this thing and make it smaller. I'm going to go back a slide. And understand some traditional uses of wild edible plants. You know, a lot of the plants that I'm going to be talking about today were already in Florida when the first settlers came here and were used by a lot of native cultures. So talking about Florida ecoregions, you know, Florida, because it runs north to south, we have a vast amount, and also the topography and the different areas that we have climate wise, we have a lot of different ecoregions. So it's very diverse in what can grow here and where it grows. It's, of course, it's going to be different from the south to the north, and a lot of the plants I'm talking about kind of exist in the southern region, which is more subtropical and tropical. And as we all know, there's different climate hardiness zones when we're in kind of it's adjusting year to year. And I heard somebody say the other day that it's moving, you know, north at a rate of several miles a year. So some of these zones are changing, and you may notice in your own yards that some of these zones are changing quite frequently. So basic plant identification. We're going to be looking at the leaf structure, the growth patterns, the ecosystems that they grow in, the root structures, the associated plants and animals, the sun water requirements and tolerance, and the fruits and the seeds. I've got some resources at the bottom of all these slides that I can share with you guys, and I'll be doing that. It looks like somebody is using the whiteboard. So if you guys can adjust that on the admin side, that would be helpful, because I see some drawings on my slides. All right, so edible parts of the plants. We've got the leaves, the tubers, fruits, berries, seeds, stems, pollen, and flowers. So those are all the different components that we're going to be talking about in each of these plants, and the different plants are going to have different components of them or parts of them that are going to be edible. So that's pawpaw in the background. We don't have that in South Florida, but that is the tropical fruit of the U.S. and central U.S. It's a very interesting fruit that has been studied for commercial production. It's a very good tasting fruit, kind of a mix between mango and sweet potato is the best way I can describe it. So there are risks with consuming wild edible plants. You know, it's the preparation, as I alluded to before, the food safety, you know, if it's not properly cleaned, and everything like that. When you're transferring it from a natural area, there may be kind of refuse or other things on it, animal droppings that can make you sick. The misidentification, there's a lot of these edible plants that may have some plants that look very similar. So never eat anything that's wild unless you're 100% sure of what it is. And then the other one is the bioaccumulation. A lot of these plants, and a lot of plants in general, are really good at bioaccumulating toxins in the environment, heavy metals, other things like that. So if you're picking this from somewhere and you don't know it used to be used at an industrial site, or there may be runoff from a neighboring area that maybe has use where there's factories, other things like that, some of these plants can bioaccumulate toxins. So you have to be very careful. So any time consuming wild edible plants, even if it's in your own yard, you've got to look at the systems that feed into that. So we're going to start off with coastal habitats, the shorelines, the sand dunes, the rocky shore, mangroves, saltwater marshes. We got one here that is invasive prickly pear. And that's a great picture by Stephen Brown that shows kind of the prickly pear in the dune environment. So we're going to start off looking at the sea grape. The sea grape was very easy to identify. It has the round leathery leaves. It has the smooth white and brown trunk, and it can be a shrub to a large tree. And sea grape is one of those things that's in a lot of our environments, and people don't always know that there's edible parts to it. Some of the bark can be used medicinally in some cultures, but mainly what we're going to consume are the berries. The sap's used as a dye for a bit. Some people use the leaves in different compositions as well, mainly medicinal. But the main edible parts that we see are these wonderful, wonderful sea grapes that the birds are really adept at knowing when they're exactly perfectly ripe. And these bunches will ripen at different times. So you won't get a whole bunch ripening at once. They'll ripen a few at a time. So they're hard to harvest, but when you do harvest them, they make I like them raw, depending on the tree and the area and the amount of rainfall. It can be quite pasty sometimes. Other times it can be quite sweet and delicious. But they make really good jams. I've never tried a wine, but I know a few people that have tried making wine out of it. Again, the sap's used as a dye to tan in the Caribbean, and then the leaves are used for all different kinds of things. My grandmother used to use them as place settings when we ever would have family meals, because they take, if you etch them with a needle from a palm tree or anything else like that, or just a regular needle that you would use to sew with, you can put people's names and all kinds of designs on them that hold for quite some time. So this is one that, the sea oats coastal plant. This is one that is all over the dunes in Florida. It's a perennial grass. Again, I think somebody's messing with the whiteboard, guys.
Yes, I see that. And I have it set on host only, so I'm not
Well,
quite
and I actually turned it off for everybody, so I'm not quite sure either. Sorry about that, David.
It did.
That's cool. As long as it's not disruptive to you guys, I'm fine.
No. When the last line went up, there was a name though that popped up. I don't want to call you out, Deb, but but the name popped up. So I think you're accidentally making blue marks on the screen with the whiteboard.
It's not a big deal. I just wanted to let you guys know I've had some talks be hacked before, and that wasn't a pleasant experience.
Oh no. Okay, sorry to interrupt. Okay.
That's okay. That's great. So this is a coastal plant, sea oats. We're actually not allowed to harvest this in Florida. There's other areas in the south of the US where you can harvest this, but it is actually protected in Florida. But the sea oats are, a grain. They're quite sweet. They're quite interesting. I have tried them before. It's quite a lot of work to get at the oats and to prepare them, but it's a very interesting plant. But we are not allowed to do this in Florida. The leaves are, 24 inches long, 10 millimeters thick, and the inflorescences we can see here in the picture I took. I think that's out in Sarasota somewhere. The inflorescence is quite beautiful, even as just a kind of decorative plant. This is really beautiful. So you've got the grain. You can cook it or make it into a flour. So this is another one, Spanish bayonet, that a lot of people don't know is edible. Of course, the stiff green leaves with barbs on the end are not edible. The white bell-shaped flowers are very distinctive. There's a lot flowering at the moment, and these can grow up to about 20 feet. This is another coastal plant that lives in the dunes, but it also can be in people's yards and in their landscapes. The edible parts are the flowers. They can be consumed raw, they can be battered, and in some places they're used as a dessert and can be candied, which, I mean, anything candied is delicious, but I really do like these flowers. They're quite delicate and crunchy. I have eaten them before. After I made this the first time, I tried them out just to see if I was advertising a good product, and they are delicious, and I tried them battered as well. Again, anything battered or candy is delicious, but raw, it's quite good to add to a salad, to add some color, also different texture. The next one is cocoa plum, a very, very common plant in our environment. You can see here on the right, all the different shapes of leaves of cocoa plum. They put out very different shaped leaves, so don't think that it's just ovate. It can be nearly round. It's a small shrub, and they have the very small white flowers here that are difficult to see when it is in flower, but when you get to the chance to look at them this close, they're quite beautiful. So the cocoa plum, again, it's another fruit that we can consume. The berries are really good in jam and wine. I've eaten them raw before, and then there's some uses of the seed for oil and the inner kernels. A lot of wildlife likes eating the inner kernels. So now we're going to move on to freshwater habitats. And if you guys have any questions as we go along, I'll answer them at the end. And there are a lot more. I'll get to that at the end as well. There are a lot more wild edible plants, mushrooms and other things like that we have other programs on. But if there's any missing here that you would like to learn more about, please reach out. So we're going to move through the freshwater ecosystems, rivers, ponds, lakes, swamps, and canals, kind of the areas that we're familiar with in the upland environments, kind of in between us and the coast. And then a lot of our neighborhoods, we have some freshwater habitats to allow for us to build. Cattail, an annoyance to some people. I got a few calls about it today, in fact, because they had to clear out the canal from cattail. But a very diverse plant when it comes to edible. So narrow, flat leaves with no mid-vein. They're about 9 feet or taller. The characteristic brown or beige blossom spikes. You can see them here. That's a very easy way to identify them, because there's a few other grasses that may be confused if they're not blossoming. But these blossom spikes definitely tell what you're looking at. So there's heaps of edible parts. The pollen is edible. It's really good in pancake batter. The rhizomes can be eaten as a vegetable. The new sprouts, fresh sprouts, can be eaten like a green vegetable or asparagus. The roots, again, can be consumed. And then the blossom spike as well can be prepared and consumed. I really like the pollen. That's probably my favorite. This is one that you have to be careful with because it is very good about in kind of areas where you're not sure what the water quality is like. It's very good at bioaccumulating toxins in the environment. I think it'll be less so with the pollen and the upper parts of the plant, but if you are getting into the soil and the rhizomes, you want to be really careful with harvesting cattail to clean it, prepare it, and be very careful that the water that you're harvesting it from is quite clean and clear. Another one, elderberry. So the elderberry here is a huge one you can see over this gentleman. And the elderberry is a 10 to 20 foot tree or shrub, white cluster flowers, purple small fruits. It looks like we have somebody coming into the room, guys. And it has small purple fruits. So the edible parts of the elderberry, we have the fruit that's used in preserves. We have the flowers, which are kind of traditionally used in a cordial, but we can use it in flour to prepare breads and desserts, and also kind of with sugar down to make a simple syrup that's very distinct. Again, elderberry you have to be very careful with because there is an identical plant that's very similar that is poisonous. So we're going to move to upland habitats. We've got our pine scrublands, our rocklands, our pine flatwoods, the hammock, and the temperate hardwoods. Not as many temperate hardwoods in the south of Florida, but I include it in here. It's for our northern friends. So this is one that should be right about now in fruit. There's a very small portion of these that are fruiting because a lot of them are male. There's very few female muscadine grapes. It's a climbing vine that has small clusters of fruit, and most wild grapes are male, as I said before. So you have to look for those female ones and see the fruits around this time of year and keep coming back. These fruits are very delicious. So we've got the edible parts. You can utilize the leaves of the grapes. You can use the fruit, the fresh, for jelly or jam or wine. And these are muscadine. They're very, very sweet grapes. And again, they're ready right about now. So the next one is a sable. It's a native palm, grows up to 30 feet, spear-shaped stem or leaf connection, smooth leaf stem, and then small oblong green seeds. It's also known as the cabbage palm locally. And that there is a reason for that because you can eat it. So the edible parts are the hearts from young palms, and then the heads are known as swamp cabbage. So you can see here, unfortunately with these, you have to kill the palm in order to get at the heart. But if you have a young palm, it's quite a delicious item. So usually I would suggest if people are clearing land or thinning out stands of sable palms to retain the heart so that they can be consumed. Again, it's another one you want to be careful with in areas that may be developed. There's toxins in the environment as well as heavy metals. This is one that I really like. It's an upland plant, kind of in sandy areas. It's a spiny, slender branches, small, kind of 1/2 inch yellow fruit. This has 3.5 inch leaves, and then small white fragrant flowers. And it kind of produces fruit year round, on and off. It'll kind of go through fruiting, flowering cycles that are dependent kind of on the rains, but usually just kind of consistently produces. The Tallowwood Hog Plum right here, you can see the little yellow fruit. It's quite a nice looking one. And I really like this. There's some go-in recipes from the south of India, having it as a curry, that you can utilize it in jams or chutneys. And they're pretty good raw as well. They're kind of sweet, a little bit pasty at times, but I really like this one when I find it. It's got some good minerals in it as well. So the pine, this is kind of an acquired taste, to say the best. We have many different kind of plants. We have a sand longleaf or slash pines. Kind of in the southern region where we are, it's mostly sand or slash pines. Not as many longleaf. As you go a bit further north, kind of into Charlotte, you start the longleaf, or what was traditionally the longleaf forest that was in across the entire southeast of the United States. You can make tea out of the needles, and then you can identify the different ones by the needles, the length of the needles, the composition of the clumping of the needles. And these get about 30 to 40 feet tall. And you don't need to know the difference to eat any of the edible components of these. So the young needles can be made into a tea. The bark can be consumed and has some nutrients and minerals. So they use these pines for creating turpentine. So there is a very strong, distinct flavor with the inner bark that tastes a little bit like turpentine. So it's not really that great, but if you need to survive, you can utilize the bark. And a lot of kind of first settlers and traditional kind of native populations utilize pine. And then the nuts. The nuts are a lot of work to get out, not like the kind of Western pines where you get the large pine nuts of the European pines. These are very small nuts, and they take a great deal of work to bang out of the pine cones. So this is a very heavy workload for a very small outcome. So we have the live oak, live or laurel oak. You know, we have the two difference. The large tree is 60 to 80 feet tall, and then 80 to 120 spread. Has a rough trunk, small flowers, and then the edible parts are the acorns. You know, the acorns can be eaten raw, they can be roasted, or they can be ground into a flour. And this is one of the most important kind of wildlife foods that we have in Florida. There's a lot of populations of wildlife like turkeys, bears, other wildlife, squirrels, as well as the invasives, the hogs and everything that use these as a major food source when they're in production. So this is one that's not commonly used, but it is delicious. The roasted, raw, and ground compositions of these are really good. It does take some work as well, though. So this is a plant that is traditionally the Yon Holly, is the most caffeinated plant in the New World before coffee was introduced. So the first kind of explorers came here and saw the native populations drinking this very dark black drink and throwing up, actually. So the Yon is Ilex vomitoria for that reason, because it does make quite a strong tea, which is good. There's actually a company in Florida, Yon Brothers, that makes the Yon tea and is working with farmers to kind of retain Yon holly and plant out different areas. So you've got the leaf shape, the red berries, and the small white flowers, and all of the hollies have some caffeination and can be used as a tea, the leaves, but you do not want to consume the berries or any other parts of the plant. It's just the leaves that if you can make into a tea, and you would want them dried. This is a really interesting plant. There's 300 species of smilax or greenbrier in the US. There's about 7 that we see in Florida quite familiarly. It's a vine. It has very spiky stems, grows in a lot of our landscapes and in the kind of disturbed areas along pathways and natural areas, and kind of an underbrush. And there's many different leaf shapes. Interesting, the shoots, the berries, the roots are all kind of utilized as food sources. The new shoots are kind of like a very delicate asparagus. They're quite strong tasting. The berries can kind of be utilized for multiple uses. Eaten raw is not that great, but you can make different kind of jams and other things like that. And then the roots are used kind of ground as a flour. They're used in sarsaparilla or root beers, and they're cooked down. So this is another one, lamb's quarters. This is quite common kind of pasture weed that we see a lot in upland areas, clustered small white flowered heads. That's a summer annual, can grow up to 5 feet in disturbed areas, groves, and pastures. The edible parts are the leaves. It's a very nutrient-rich green. This is one that, you know, I go out and kind of select during the summer months as just kind of a staple green, you know, like a spinach or something like that. Another one is the wild radish. This is the Flora Betany. It's a common lawn weed, so you want to be careful harvesting it in your lawn if you use a lot of chemicals on the lawn. It has the spiked flower heads, and then flowers in clusters of 3 to 6. And then it has these beautiful, if you can see this tiny picture in the middle of the screen, these beautiful rattle-shaped tubers that are radish-like. They're delicious, actually. I've had this before several times, and it's a great addition to any kind of salad, or just, eaten raw. So what did we miss? We missed a lot. We missed kind of dandelions, sorrel, beautyberry, persimmons, other types of greenbrier, blueberries, hawthorn, coontie, huckleberries, cleavers, mushrooms, wax myrtle, wild oranges, Seminole pumpkin, Brazil pepper is another edible one that a lot of people don't utilize. Water lilies, sword ferns, prickly pears, saw palmettos, mushrooms, maypops, dollar weeds, citrons. So there are a lot that we missed in this presentation, but to keep it in time for today's talk, I wanted to keep it quite short. Again, if you need any resources or want to kind of research nutrient values, we have some links here that I'll share. And then there's some really good kind of resources, edible food plants of the world for, searching out different food plants in your garden. And then my food data nutrition fact sheet is a good one as well. Then we have some really good resource books. In Florida, you have the Florida Incredible Wild Edibles. The Ethnobotany is really interesting to find all the traditional uses. I use that as a reference constantly. It's very hard to find nowadays, so go check your local library, see if they have it, and borrow it. And then this one, the Florida Edible Wild Plants, is a really great guide to collecting and cooking. So it provides recipes and different ideas of how to prepare the food that you find in the environment. Again, another thing that I like to say is, with a lot of natural areas in Florida, we take only pictures and leave only footsteps, and that's true for all kind of county parks, state parks. You can get some harvest in national parks, but you have to get a special license, and in national forests. I think that's mainly, not in national parks, sorry. But yeah, in any private lands, if you have the permission of the landowner, you can harvest wild plants. So please, do so carefully and with permission. And we've got heaps and heaps of garden resources that I have here that I'll share also. And these are all kind of foraging and ecoregion downloads and all of that. So I'll share that as well. And again, be careful. You may have allergies to some of these foods. There may be some things that build up in your system as a result of overconsumption. Take time with preparation, understand it, know how to prepare things properly. Remember the accumulation of toxins in certain areas. Plants are really good at accumulating toxins in their environment, and heavy metals included. Make sure you identify 100% correctly and know and understand the restrictions and laws around the harvest of wild edibles. That's it, guys. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Thanks, David.
No problem.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute.
No, that's okay. I did just launch the poll so that folks can get an opportunity if they could respond to that while we're answering questions. And actually, David, I have a question for you.
Yep.
You mentioned with like the Yon Holly that there was a company that was trying to do that was a commercial value. Are there any other ones in particular that are being harvested on a larger commercial scale?
Just the Yon that I know currently, because of the high caffeination of it. Also, it's a native that they were trying to, get farmers maybe that have rangelands or other things to introduce. Again, the berries can be poisonous. They're good for wildlife. Some birds like them as well, but none others that I know of currently that they're exploring.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't see any questions in the chat box or the question and answer box, but please feel free to ask. Oh, there's one. Oh, that said thank you. Thank you for coming. I have a comment and then I have a question. Okay. So my comment, the one that baffled me the most, that I was the most excited about, is the Spanish bayonet. I had no idea that the flowers were edible, and I have those in my yard. In fact, I have a lot of those plants in my yard that, as a FFL person, I always think of, basic landscaping. And my mind doesn't necessarily go, is this edible? That's not the first thing I think about, but so many of those are basic Florida friendly landscaping plants, and that they're edible is, really cool. And, but anyway, the Spanish bayonet kind of blew me away. I'm interested to try it next time it flowers.
Yeah, the candied ones are really amazing because you can do a candied flower. It's quite dramatic when you candy the whole flower. And this is a component of kind of I'm putting together with Zach Brim, who's doing the agroecology lab, kind of an edible landscaping class where we're going to go through and design landscapes in an edible fashion. So this is kind of one of the components that I've been working with over the past few years. I also do a food forest class. So if there's any interest in that, I'm happy to share those or deliver them. And if anybody here has any questions, I have a lot more information. It's very difficult to fit it in a half hour. Even on the slides that I provided, I have a lot more information on the plants that I was delivering today. I was being careful to stick with the time that we have allotted.
Out of all of your favorite Florida native edibles, which one is your favorite?
I mean, I think the most rewarding, because it only comes once a year, I think the muscadine grapes, because I have the few, because there are so many that are male. So I know the few places, there's a couple parks that I walk into that right at the entrance of those parks, I know that there's a female vine, and every August I go and check it and have a few of those just sweet grapes. So I think that may be connected to a lot of other things, but that's probably my favorite. The Smilax is really fun to play with. The Smilax to make root beers, and also the fresh green shoots. I really like playing with that. And there's different flavors on the different Smilax. And again, the tendrils are really kind of an acquired taste. They're quite strong, but if you cook them down with butter, I guess anything tastes good with butter, right? Yeah. They're delicious. So yeah, I mean, I think that, and again, there's vast many more. We have a mushroom program that we do as well, and there's a lot. Like, so the sea grape, there's a type of chanterelle that was discovered in Florida called the pink flamingo chanterelle that lives in sea grapes. So they're mycorrhizal, so they are key to that ecosystem. They provide a lot of the things within the ecosystem where sea grapes are, and they have these beautiful chanterelles that come up every year.
Nice.
And those are delicious. That's like my favorite mushroom, probably.
Very cool. Very cool.
All right.
Okay.
Well, that was very interesting. Thank you again.
Yeah,
that was great.
That was great.
The Smilax very surprised me a lot. I would never have even thought about those as a go-to edible species for sure.
Yeah, admittedly, I pull them out of my yard a lot because they're thorny, and
that's what I was thinking.
There's another one. I mean, Kunti is a huge one that was used in traditional cultures. Also, the first settlers that came here. It's very, very poisonous. But if you do harvest it right and prepare the Kunti, it's the kind of the root of the Kunti. It was used as a starch staple and a flour for making breads. And that's why the Atala butterfly almost became extinct, because the Kunti was harvested so much that it was just down to the Florida Keys. So I don't like to promote the Kunti, one, because it's so poisonous, and two, we have a lot of other starch that we can make bread with. So that's another one that's really interesting. But if you guys have any questions, please reach out, and I appreciate your time today.
Well, we appreciate yours. Thank you so much.
Terrific.
Okay, everybody, next week we'll have our last one, the Florida 101, and I'm actually teaching that. It is, can you plant this here? So we're going to go over the basics of Florida friendly landscaping. So hopefully we'll see you same time, same place for our last one next Wednesday at 12 noon. Thank you again.
Bye.